Hello, everybody, and welcome to Teachers in the Dungeon. I'm Tom Gross, and joining me right here in the dungeon is Dan Ream. Hello, Dan.
Good morning, with morning voice yet again.
Morning voice, and we just happened to say right before this is going to be an outtake show.
Yes.
It took me about 5 times to get that intro started, so now that we're rolling...
They'll be so impressed with our basso profundo voices.
That's right. And this week, I don't have Marcus to harass me the entire show.
Yeah, that was good. You looked a little emotionally devastated by that.
I was. I rolled poorly on my, or actually I rolled too well on my insight and realized that he really was trying to hurt my feelings. Anyway, speaking of last week's show, some of the more astute listeners may realize that it is February. No, I'm sorry. It is March. February and March. It's early in the year, and we've already flip-flopped our schedule.
Yes.
Sorry about that, folks, but today's episode might tell you why that is the case, because our creature type this month is the kind of tricksters that would do such a thing where they would flip-flop shows or mess things up on you just to see if you're paying attention.
Completely unpredictable,
or just to see if it's going to trip you up. So, our show today is creature types, and the type is Fae.
Yes. I even tried to prepare a little bit. I found this. Oh, yes, the Fae. Ineffably beautiful, completely inscrutable, everlastingly capricious. Much like our Illinois weather, one moment warm and placid, the next moment cruel and heartless, but always, always unpredictable.
I love it. You found that or you wrote that?
I wrote that.
Yes, I was going to say. It got a little personal there in Illinois and whatnot.
But I say the one constant about Fae, from my view, is that they always make gameplay more fun.
Fun or frustrating, depending on where you're sitting at the table.
Yes. From a DM's perspective, they make anything and everything possible. Yep. So to skip to the ending, my recommendation is to sprinkle more Fae into your homebrews.
More Fae. The more cowbell on SNL, but more Fae from the DM. Okay, definitely. Very good. Before we get started in the Fae, though, emails have been flooding in, and you've been sending emails out and getting emails back, and it is that time of year where we are starting to look forward to the largest gaming convention in North America, or I don't know if it's the world's
they
largest.
Probably claim the world, but I think there's one in Germany that I'm dating myself. West Germany, that hasn't been that way that's been 30 years ago. But anyway, yes, I think there's one in Germany that's larger. But Gen Con's pretty darn big.
So, are you getting excited?
So, devastated more like. I got my time for the housing portal.
Oh,
if you haven't been to Gen Con, they randomize your access to booking hotels. And the hotels are pretty much in lockstep that you can't go on Expedia and pick those dates for Indianapolis and you won't find a hotel room. If you do, they are $680 or up per night. Yeah. So it's very democratic. The Gen Con folks, once you've bought your badge, they just generate a random time when you can access the portal so it doesn't crash. So it starts at noon Eastern time tomorrow. Okay. And my time is 2:17 p.m.
2
hours and 17 minutes after it opens. So I think we're going to be using
Champaign, Illinois.
Yep, using Ubers probably to get to and from, which isn't terrible, but...
So I know you and I have talked about this, and we haven't really talked about it on the show, and it's not necessarily criticism. It's just I wish they'd kind of reorder the way in which things are done. Mm-hmm. Because we applied for Trade Day to present at Trade Day, and that information, we don't get confirmation of that until, I don't know, another 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And badges come with that. Mm-hmm. But badge sales happened last weekend, and then parking sales happened a while ago where you could reserve parking near the stadium.
Right. It's all out of order.
but if I don't know, and then hotels are this weekend, it's all kind of backward, because if I wasn't able to get a parking or a hotel that's close, well, I would want parking. So then I would be interested in, if we did it in order, to be able to get parking next weekend.
Yes.
But I already had to get parking a month ago when I didn't know where my hotel was going to be, and it could be right downtown, and I could walk, but I have a parking spot now. And I might have already bought a badge, but then got my trade day. So now I have 2 badges, and now we have to go through.
That's the situation I'm in, and they'll refund the other badge.
But it's all sort of like not in a good order.
Yeah.
And I realize most people don't do trade day, so that's not an issue. So then I just go to the hotel portal. It comes way after the parking opens up that you could purchase, and it could be. I feel like from a visitor standpoint, it could be streamlined to make more sense of, okay, I got my badge. Good. Now I need a hotel. Next weekend, I get in the hotel portal. Great. I got a hotel. But, I need parking because I'm not close. Get into the next portal for... Portal, am I saying... Is that right?
Yes.
I feel like it's Dungeons and Dragons terms. But then I need to get parking.
Right.
I don't know. It's all sort of just...
If we ran it...
Shot. Right. If we ran it, we would know exactly what to do, because we know everything about how to run Gen Con. And again, like I said, it's not criticism. It's just sort of like, man, I wish they could put it into an order that makes sense for us.
And I have bothered them repeatedly with emails already about this issue, and they're very kind about it. They're just like, yeah, sorry, that's the way it is.
I'm glad this year you're doing that, because you're much more on top of things than I was. But yes, every time last year I tried to contact them, it was within a day or so. It wasn't weeks. It was, tomorrow or the next day, and they were back, and they were very helpful. Yeah. So there is that. All right.
So there must be some Fae in the machine there that are kind of...
Yeah. Right. No, but definitely looking forward to that. I'm really excited to see how with the result of our application for Trade Day.
Yes.
I think what came out of last year's conversation with the crowd that we had, and then the work that you've done to prepare for this year's topic, which we'll talk about another day. But I'm excited for that to see what kinds of things we can do, and the conversation that we have with people. That will be exciting.
Yes.
So yes, let's talk creatures.
Okay.
Let's talk creatures.
So I did the research on the background here.
I was going to say, did you even need to do research? Because, and the reason I say that, and I'm not joking, is you infuse Fae quite heavily into, especially certain adventures. Our Slight adventure was wildly Fae. That was a good adjective to put in front of Fae. But other ones, even ones that are not necessarily focused around Fae, you always have them in there someplace.
They're fun they're definitely fun to
badger us, or irritate us, or except for Mark. Mark always loves it when the Fae show up, because he just loves to banter with Fae. So you did a little background. Let's hear the background of the Fae.
Yeah. So the research I did was enough to see that if we really dig into it, we'd be here for hours. There's a lot. So I'm going to paint in pretty broad strokes, but just some things to start out with. They do come from the Feywild, which is a different plane, one of the other planes in the kind of cosmology of Dungeons and Dragons, but it's one that's very, very closely aligned with the material plane. Lots of portals between, so that explains why you're likely to see so many Fae and rather fewer creatures from other planes, because it's a little harder to get to the material plane from them. If you've seen Critical Role, I think they did a really nice job. They jump into the Feywild very briefly, and the cartoon, the animated series that they did on Amazon, you get a really good view of their perspective on the Feywild, which I think is accurate. It's very much like not that I would know, but very much like an LSD or acid trip.
Okay, all right.
You have rivers flowing uphill and then disappearing, floating mountains, candy-colored trees, grass that devours anything that steps in it, rain that turns you to stone or to solid diamond. It's just it's and again, it really encourages just wild flights of fancy if, as a DM, you want to bring your party into the Feywild. Seriously, anything goes there. And again, it looks harmless and fun, but can turn in an instant to be very deadly. It kind of allows you to break free of the normal plotting that you would expect from a usual D&D adventure, where things kind of have to make sense.
Right. So you're basing most of your research comes from the Dungeons and Dragons books, the
Yes.
5e books. So I did a parallel look at the Fae from a third party. Our friend Andrew K. Wood has his Monsters of the Feywild, Monsters of the Feywild 2, Feyland. And so I've been looking through some of those books, exploring that avenue. And I suspect that there's going to be lots of parallel. But being third party, I also suspect that there will be slight differences, or at least a little bit more structure to the K. Wood Publishing book. So just to follow along with what you're doing, I'm looking at Monsters of the Feyland. Gosh, I keep messing that up. Monsters of the Feyland 2, Well of Dreams is the book that I'm looking at when I did my research, and certainly follows very closely along. He keeps the spirit of the Fae. He describes Feyland as a world where emotions run rampant and nothing is as it seems. That goes right along. One thing that you haven't mentioned that I suspect you will, and it just hasn't come up, but that comes up very early in Monsters of the Feyland, is that, or at least it's not mentioned, it's observation on my part, is that it seems to be very nature-based. The Fae are very outdoorsy type creatures. In Monsters of the Feyland, it talks about connectedness to seasons. And in this book, there are courts, Fae courts of spring, summer, autumn, and winter, which really helps to sort of encapsulate how the Fae organize themselves, in my mind. And then also alignments go along with each of those. So the summer and the spring are generally aligned to the good Fae, and autumn and winter are more aligned to the evil Fae, and then anything else out there are considered wild Fae. So that's that. I thought that was an interesting way of organizing the world in which K. Wood Publishing has created. And a note about the good is, just because a Fae is good doesn't mean that they're not going to be ornery and unpredictable and whatnot. That I don't know. I didn't really look through the alignments of the monsters and the creatures to see if there are any that are lawful good. I would suspect most Fae are either chaotic good or chaotic evil.
A lot of neutrals.
And a lot of neutrals. Just because of their unpredictability. Anyway, so I want to bring in where my notes are coming from, and sort of give the foundation of this. So I'll toss it back to you to continue on your research.
From what I can see, there seems to be about 6 categories that you can put Fae into. And the very notion of categorizing Fae is sort of goes against their nature. And so the structure is very chaotic. There's some logic, but there's some that are that are very random. And I don't know if that was accidental or if the writers of the D&D materials are working on multiple levels here, but it does fit the Fae in general that even categorizing them breaks down a little bit.
Got it.
So, as I said, there are 6. And I was going to just run through them real quick, but maybe I'll just do them one by one. And we'll start with the one that we're not going to talk about because it's a whole separate thing, and that's elves.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So elves are from the Feywild, but they're more integrated into the material plane than the Feywild anymore. You know, there's drow, there's high elves, there's wood elves, there's eladrin, all sea elves, all kinds of different categories there. And those are... Now a lot of Fae have become playable races, but in the traditional mindset, it was really just the elves that were playable. So I figured we'd set those aside, and we can maybe look at that some other time.
But it explains why elves have that sort of separatedness, or some would consider aloofness. I always thought that was just because of how long they lived. that they had this sort of otherness to the rest of the humanoids in the material plane. It could play into it, I suppose, but the fact that reminding me that they are of the Fae would also give another reason why they have a different sort of perspective on the world.
This is a deep cut. Are you familiar with the fantasy author Terry Brooks? Does the Shannara?
I know of Terry Brooks.
So he built out his sort of world mythology and had elves and gnomes and trolls and things. And in his telling of it, he kind of set his stuff in our world, but after, like, there was a big nuclear conflagration, and then ages after, humans sort of reemerged, but they've been mutated. So you had the gnomes and trolls and dwarves were essentially from human stock.
Okay.
But he made a point of saying the elves are always different. And he did that in the second book, The Elfstones of Shannara. And I don't know, but that popped into my head when I was looking at this, that there's sort of a parallel thing going on there where their appearance on the material plane is different.
I've always wanted to read Terry Brooks, but have never gotten. I mean, they're sizable books, if I recall correctly.
They go pretty quick.
But yeah, that sounds cool.
He peaked with his second one, I think. The Elfstones.
The Elfstones.
Sword of Shannara, I apologize if I offend anybody here, but it really is just Lord of the Rings knockoff.
Right.
Very, very beat for beat.
Really?
Like Lord of the Rings.
Interesting.
But he published it like in the late 70s, right when there was a wave of Lord of the Rings popularity. And that's kind of when I think the fantasy genre really exploded. So he wrote that. And in his second book, he goes off in a different direction. And to my feeble mind, it's much more original content.
Sure.
I would say. So, but anyway, sorry, that's a tangent. Okay, so the first category is Fae that have connections with place. It's a good geography term.
Interesting.
So this is, again, it can be a physical location. It can be a physical thing. Most of these are neutral and good. So dryads, naiads, any Fae that is connected with, directly with nature, as you were saying earlier. So those are fun to work with because, again, they can just kind of show up anytime your characters are marching along in the wilds.
Yeah.
They can come across a spring or a brook or a pool with a naiad like you guys did. Dryads are fun. You can play them very innocent and skittish. You can play them very seductive if you want. You can portray them as very fierce. They're not high-level CR, but they can cast Shillelagh, and for a low-level party, they can do some damage, either on your behalf or to you.
I was going to say, they helped us. They helped us in that one, I don't know, it was the battle that we planned out. And
yes.
And if you want to know more about the topic that we're talking about, go back and look at our Slight episodes.
Yes.
Because this description is there's the battle where they came down into the grove and we sort of tried to drive them in that area.
Yeah,
I remember them casting.
You had zombies and a wight coming after you.
Yes, that's right. And they did a lot of support magic, if I recall correctly.
Yes.
So, okay, cool. And well, you're talking about Fae that have a place. The Monsters of Faeland brings up that as a topic, and they talk about how the land that Fae inhabit oftentimes take on a magical sort of aura with unpredictable properties, like you had mentioned floating islands or rivers that seemingly go the opposite direction than, and I think you had a river like that, wasn't it in Slight, where it would switch directions, or it was a two-way river. We were going we were on the river on a barge.
Yes.
And I can't remember exactly how that worked, but nonetheless, I thought of that. Or even just wind that strikes up a conversation with you when you're in and amongst a place of the druids, or the Fae. And wind just going through and just whispering to you. That's
a kind of a nice crossover with elementals. It seems like it'd be a natural.
Oh, yeah. So anyway, when you mentioned Fae with place, that came to mind.
Yes. So those are definitely fun ones to play. as well. There's not too many examples of those in the actual published D&D materials. There's dryads, and then in some of the earlier ones, there's nymphs and nixies and things like that. But most of those are not in 5th edition. But once you get a feel for them, it's easy to create your own. That's what I did. I just kind of reskinned a dryad when you guys met the water nymph, and just changed some of her abilities a little bit. But it's the same general idea.
Okay. So I would have when you said Fae with place, I thought for sure what you were going to say were hags. So did they fit into a different category? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yep.
Ready to move on.
Okay. So our next one is, we'll just go ahead and go to the next one. Hags are their own category.
Hey, all right. Good.
Because they are, I kind of feel like the people at Wizards of the Coast had a mindset that Fae are very fairy tale like creatures. Hags, particularly green hags, overlay the typical wicked witch of a fairy tale.
Okay.
So they put hags in that category. So hags, except for night hags.
All right.
Now again, it's interesting that they chose to do this. I'm not quite sure why, other than it'd be cool that the night hags are actually fiends.
Okay.
So they can function with other hags, but they have a different origin, and they are more powerful.
A night hag is.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and the other traditional hags are the sea hag is the weakest, and then the green hag, and then the night hag. But then they've expanded, and they've got the bur hag and the anise hag that are physically more powerful, but still don't have quite the night hags are nasty. They can actually, they infect your nightmares, and they basically just extract your living essence.
You used the night hag on us at some point. I think you were giving Marcus's character.
Yeah.
Or was it Chris giving one of them? Mark's getting those
nightmares that take down your HP, and they will actually grab your soul and put it in their soul bag. And then you're just dead.
That just sounds awful.
So I kind of pulled my punches with that when at that point, I wasn't, I was still a much newer DM, and I didn't know how to handle that, so I just didn't push in that direction.
The bag of souls.
Yeah.
Jeez, it sounds terrible.
The hags are pretty much always evil, but in a Fae kind of way. And I think that's what makes green hags are my favorite to play. I really like them because they are the typical old witch.
Okay.
And they can be a final boss for low-level characters. But I think they're more fun to just kind of put in there as an obstacle. If a party approaches a green hag, it's not like she's not a demon or a monstrous creature that thinks food or whatever. Right. She sees them as just, she's going to be grumpy, and she's going to try to mess with them maybe. Or she might be completely uninterested. Just leave me alone. I want to do my own stuff. I've got a cauldron that I'm boiling here. I don't want to talk to you right now. Right. You can play it however you want to play it, and make her useful to them. And this is where, again, another tangent. I just heard on a podcast the little cliche that no characters in a book can ever be smarter than the author. You can't write somebody smarter than yourself. And
as hard as some of us might try.
And the green hag, the lore on her is she knows things, she will give you information, but she wants to make a deal, and she will always make a deal where she gives you what you say you want, but it ends up being devastating to you some way. And she loves to cause misery in that way. And I haven't figured out a good way to do that, because you got to work on multiple levels. You got to figure out what the characters want. You got to figure out a way to give them that, but also figure out a way that when they get what they say they want, it's painful.
I can't help but think about, so you mentioned fairy tales, so my brain started going crazy into those stories, and I think about who is it? It's not Cinderella, it's Snow White. Snow White wants love, and she finds I hope I'm doing the right one. It's the one with the apple. The witch with the apple. You eat this apple, you'll get your prince. But is it something like that? It seems like those multiple levels show up in that. And I guess I think of that witch as potentially a green hag.
Oh yeah, definitely. And the other main thing, and yes, in several, I mean, obviously in Wizard of Oz, essentially in Sleeping Beauty, any of the Rapunzel, they show up again and again and again, and it's always the same thing, kind of wheedling.
I'll help you, but I'm going to get something, but I'm also going to screw you over.
Yes, if at all possible. And the other thing cool about hags is, of course, they can form a coven, and when they form a coven, their power level jumps. Okay. And I never do a good job as a DM having multiple NPCs talk to each other, because then I feel like I'm just play acting for you guys. But I think a skilled DM could really have fun with a hag coven, because they don't like each other. Hags don't like anybody.
Right.
To get three of them together and to have them sort of bicker in front of the party, I think could be really fun.
Yeah, it reminds me of that mythology with the witches. Is it Perseus? Where it's the three witches and they all have one eye that they can see with?
They've brought that into D&D.
Okay.
They do have a hag's eye where they can then position it anywhere they want and see you coming.
Yeah, but they would just fight and bicker and just be mean to each other. And did they even lose the eye in like the soup or something? I don't remember now, but yeah. So that's okay. So very classical. It's a very classic story.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Cool. One piece of that comes up in Monsters of the Feyland is that Fey love to make deals.
Yeah.
And so I don't think it's just hags though, but that's a nice component that. And what I really like about that, and I'll be curious to know if this is how it works with the other categories of Fey. Hags you've established will make the deal with you, but in their favor, and also not only in their favor, but to pull one over on you for something awful to happen to you. I wonder, do other Fae do that as well, or is that a characteristic of a hag?
I think hags plot that out. I would guess that with some other Fae, they might to a certain extent, but often it will be just because they aren't paying enough attention to realize this is going to hurt you.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, sure. I'll give you what you want. Without the consequence.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Okay. The next group is, I think this is kind of cool the way they've come up with this is a group of creatures that are born from strong emotion. So if in the Feywild, if there is a creature that experiences a really intense, usually negative emotion, it can give birth to actual creatures. So I've used a few of these, but the examples that are listed are meanlocks. I haven't used. They're like burrowing insect-like things. Boggles.
Yes.
And redcaps.
We've encountered redcaps, and I think boggles as well.
You have encountered both of those, yes.
Redcaps are the ones with they stomp. Yes. So they're created out of an intense emotion from something else, or just because of something else. Do you know what I'm saying? Is it something has a massive emotion, so these just pop out?
I think so.
Is it something has an emotional? I don't know what I'm trying to say. Anyway, so, okay, these are cool. I like that. I like their formation. So,
and again, they're much more likely to be evil, usually chaotic. But again, in a storybook kind of way, comical.
They were willing to work with us. In fact, this is the scene where, or this is the story part in Slaint where Wade had to be mean.
You had to bully him.
I had to bully him, and that is not Wade's thing. And it was kind of fun. So, I rolled well too.
Yes, you did. You did. But they're fun because they're the kind of, particularly Boggles, will just trash talk, and so it's fun to, if you're into that kind of thing, to just, as I said, trash talk. Just find the most awful things you can say about the player characters. It's not me, it's the Boggles saying it.
Yeah, right. Oh, did they say something about you as a player? I'm sorry, that's the Boggle. He must know.
So they're low level. You wouldn't use them. They wouldn't be any threat at all to characters that are 4th or 5th level. but unless they're in mass.
Right.
But earlier on, they can be a threat, but then they can also be sort of unruly frenemies.
I was going to say, the way you used the redcaps was kind of a cool way. The way they approached us was almost as enemy or as like a bully, but they had information. I think they knew where the hag was. We were looking for one of the hags, and they knew where she was. And so we had to bully them to get them to show us.
Right. Because they weren't the type to like negotiate. That doesn't work for them.
Right. So I think that was cool. What it did was, instead of fighting them, it was a different type of fight. It was a persuasion or intimidation type of a battle.
Yeah.
Which was cool. It brought a cool aspect to the game, and again made my character and really me as a player go out of my comfort zone and be a bully. That's generally not me, nor was it the way the character that I built. So that was a fun thing to do, and definitely brought a new aspect to the game. They were created out of intense emotional. That is in the Fey land as well, where Fey are extremely unpredictable. Even good ones are impulsive, emotional, and intense. So that explains how that might like manifest something that's in that. Like, I'm picturing redcaps are they look like mushrooms.
No, they look like garden gnomes.
Oh, okay. I was just picturing
with big boots.
I was just picturing that like the emotional intention, the intensity of the emotion might make something in the land pop to like a sentient being. That's just how I'm doing it in my head.
Yeah, no, that works too.
However, all right, cool.
Okay,
what else do we have?
The next one. This is a little bit. This one now. This is where we're having to really stretch to categorize.
All right.
So the category I come up with is small / insect features.
I like it.
So this is, again, another category that's just full of fun. You've got sprites, pixies, and quicklings.
Sprites, pixies, and quicklings? Okay, yeah.
Now, the first two are neutral, tend toward good. Quicklings are evil.
Right.
But they are, again, tiny creatures. They can't really... Pixies have no way to actually sap hit points from you at all. All they can do is try to put you to sleep or confuse you or do some things like that. Sprites can do 1 hit point damage max.
With little tiny rapiers is how I picture them. Toothpicks.
They usually are ranged because they don't want to get close to you. But I think I changed that a little bit for you guys too. And so they're a lot of fun to play. I had a lot of fun with the names that I came up with for them. And
they were mighty creative.
And so, again, the way I've used them is with the pixies, they can fangirl on a character and just swarm and sit and kind of embarrass and again become rivals for the attention of one of the characters. Yeah. The sprites, I have them tough talk and try to pick a fight, even though they're tiny. I picture a little tiny Peter Pan rushing down on him.
You ain't got nothing on me.
And quicklings I haven't really used much, but I think they're just sort of an evil version of that.
Okay.
As the name suggests, they move very, very fast. They will come in and...
Can they steal? Like that would be the kind of thing where like they take something of yours that you might need coming up, or I don't know, but maybe they're not big enough to do that kind of thing.
They could if you had a MacGuffin that was small enough. That's a good idea. They could probably do that, and it'd be hard to get them.
Minions of something that's larger, like you have a wand that you're going to use, and the boss sends the quicklings to rip those off of you.
Yeah.
So that you walk into the battle without your main things. Yeah. Okay. Cool. I like the way when you mention that, I can't help but think about Bert. Bert and his fan club.
Yeah, Bert's Girls.
Bert's Girls. Yeah, that's right. So yeah, fun. Those are great role play.
Yeah. Type
creatures. They can be harassment in a battle, but really it's more the before and after that you can have some fun with. One of my deepest moments of shame as a DM was when I was running a group for my daughter and my high school buddies, their kids,
and then my daughter. So, and my daughter was over 20, so she was a young adult. But her character had made friends with a pixie pixies can help you fly. So they were up against Artaxis early on.
Our buddy.
My daughter has a barbarian, so she was getting into melee with him because he's flying. And her pixie is on her shoulder. And I had Artaxis just blast the pixie. And of course, they have like 2 hit points. So she was dead.
Disintegrated.
And I did it just tactically because he would do that and cause the barbarian to fall. But everybody at the table just stared at me. And I'm like, oh, that was... Probably shouldn't have inflicted that emotional damage on my daughter. Actually, I don't think she was pretty resilient about it, but like, that was not nice.
Maybe you should have had a sprite bully the group and say, stop being that way. It happens to us. It's part of our culture. All right. What else do we have?
So, last group, we're right to the end one, and this is just miscellaneous, hard to categorize.
Wild.
Yes.
The wild phase.
So I'll just list them quickly, and we don't talk about all of them, but this is where I put the blink dog, the satyr, and these 3 others you may not be as familiar with. I only barely was aware of them. Darklings, Kored, and the Yethhound.
Ooh, the last 2 I don't know. The Darklings I was aware of.
So the Darklings are, I'll start with them because they were brand new to me. They are cursed fae, and they age whenever they are in sunlight.
That I did not know. That's kind of cool.
So they have to stay in the dark. So as they absorb light, they age, and eventually it's enough to kill them. And when they die, it's like a bomb because all of the light is released at once from their body. So you kill a darkling, and you're going to get a really bad sunburn.
Yeah. Wow.
So that one is, I think, pretty cool. A Kored is sort of like a boggle with hair. Tiny round-shaped little fae. They're neutral and less likely to be tricksters than boggles. They just kind of stay in the deeps like a gnome, or they're sort of like deep gnomes or dwarves. They enjoy working with stone and that sort of thing. And the Yethhound is an evil creature, but it's as the name suggests, a dog-like creature, but it's got a human head.
Ew.
So it's a little awful to look at. But, of course, my favorites are the blink dogs and satyrs. They're a lot of fun to play.
The satyrs you use quite well.
So the blink dogs are fun because they are good, and I'm sure listeners know they can teleport. So they can be a useful NPC to sort of tag along with the group.
Right.
The group that I play in, that our buddy Jay leads, allowed one of our characters to keep a blink dog as a pet.
Okay.
We had rescued it from a situation early on. And then the player, it worked perfectly. The player was so attached to it that he would not allow it to go into combat with us usually. He would make it stay back.
Oh, I see. Yeah,
keep it
didn't
safe.
want it to get hurt.
Yeah,
because they're not real high on the hit point level either.
No,
most fae seem to be pretty low.
Yeah, there aren't. You have to go to Archfey, I think, to you've got to buff most of these. Hags can take quite a bit, but that's really it.
Okay.
So, and then satyrs, of course. Now, again, you can, depending on the MPAA rating of your table, you can take satyrs in a lot of different directions. If you take them in the traditional Greek direction, then highly sexualized, probably very dirty mouth.
Yeah.
And with us, again, middle-aged men, family guys.
Thanks for calling us middle-aged.
I dialed that back and made them a little suggestive at times, but for the most part, just leaned into the supposed drunkenness and kind of just out of control behavior.
Right.
And satyrs again are. I tend to pair them in my mind with dryads, both forest creatures, and tend to see them as coexisting. And whereas the dryads would be more likely to show interest and compassion, satyrs, sometimes I'll have them just mock and just rile up a company, a group. They do have ranged attacks. They can play their pan flute and with that, they can lull you to sleep or do, just do some other things. And so they have some ability to make life a little uncomfortable in a way that's fun to role play.
Yeah. Okay. So with the giants, we talked maybe some potential starting ideas for adventure or for a campaign. What would be some ways in which you might use? We've talked sort of generally about how you might use some of these characters or these creatures as NPCs or as storylines. But what would be some like idea starters for some Fae to get involved? It seems like they have the ability to have information because of the nature in which they sort of exist. They sort of are present but not involved, and so they hear a lot of stuff. Is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, that's a good point. They all have the ability to make themselves unnoticed. Dryads have tree stride, so they can just be. If you're in a forest, you never know where they are, and they can get away anytime they want. Satyrs can't quite as much, but they're going to hide and run away as much as possible, and the others too. So I think that's good. Yeah, that they could be. Actually, you say that, and that would provide some variety and some interest. That yes, if you have to go to them for information, that's a pretty typical plot point in an adventure. But they would make it unique because they may not want to be found. They might, you could play them any way you want, from drunken to wheedling to evil to just kind of detached. Right. You've got all those things.
So you've got that, and then, but there are some boss-like characters potentially with Fae, where you've got the hags that might have, where you have to do some sort of a task to either please a hag, to pass through their area, or to get something that you need from them. So there's some potential there.
And I think that's where Kaywood really shines, is that he has buffed up a lot of Fae to give a lot of, if you want to use Fae as some sort of antagonist for a higher level party, he's got you covered with that sort of thing.
He does. I wrote down in, so out of the Faeland 2 book, some notable Fae that are in the Land of Mir. So I mentioned that he breaks it down by summer, the seasons. And so the head of the summer court is the Oak Lord, which is these names are really cool. But also going along with that theme of nature in many of these. So you've got the Oak Lord. You have for the head of the spring court is the Lady of Swans. The Skeleton King is the head of the autumn court, so kind of bringing in an undead aspect to it. And then the Snow Queen as the head of the winter court. Now I didn't. These must be in the first book, which I don't have, and so I wasn't able. But when I saw Snow Queen, I thought, a hag, and that sort of. I don't know that that's what that is. My mind started wandering when I thought Snow Queen and Fae.
I'm forgetting whether I think it's the Burr hag that is connected to cold.
Okay.
In the D&D lore. So
you could have that, and then I just mentioned this because from our conversations with Andrew how he loves to do plays on words, and he's really masterful about that.
Yes.
One of the secret factions of the Unseelie court is Thelonious Punk and his punk scholars, which in the second book of the Faeland really kind of play an important role in the story that he builds here, in that they have taken over the Ivory Tower and they have control over the Well of Dreams, which is the portal or what created Faeland. And so they've got some ideas of how they want to control the land. Okay. And so Thelonious Punk and his punk scholars, which I can't help. You can't help but laugh at that. But they're punks. Let me tell you, they are in this book, and they are punks, and they'd be a lot of fun to fight with and whatnot. But to your point of that Kaywood Publishing and Andrew does a really good job of beefing up some of these Fae to where you could really create a story and have them be, what your story is about.
Yeah.
So, well, this is a lot of fun. I learned a ton. I was hoping to maybe get some clues as to where you might be going with some of these Fae and some of our upcoming stories, but I didn't really get that. But I do see now, kind of pulling the curtain back, I see now where you came from in developing some of these characters and where they came from. And Fae is something that just sort of, I look through the DMs or the monster manual, and they just sort of are part of page turns. I hardly ever give the Fae the attention that they probably deserve. And after today, and seeing how you might use them within a story that doesn't even have anything to do with Fae, but as you said, if you're in the wilderness, in any type of setting, from mountains to plains to forests to the sea, Fae could play an interesting role in the story.
Yeah, definitely.
So, well, if you've used Fae in any of your stories, we'd love to hear how you've used them. Do you follow some of the interpretations that Dan and I mentioned, or do you have a different interpretation of how to use a satyr or a dryad or a hag? We'd love to hear your comments on the show or on how you use Fae. You can send us an email at teachersinthedungeon@gmail.com or reach out to us through social media. We are Teachers in the Dungeon on Facebook and Instagram, and at Dungeon Teachers on X or Twitter. We'd love to hear from you. We also have a YouTube channel where our episodes show up, and if we're talking about something, we will put the image of, so I'd imagine in this episode, we'll see some pictures of satyrs and dryads and hags, and it's a different way to listen to the episode. So thank you so much for joining us for our monsters. No, our... this was going to be a mighty finish, and I just blew it. I rolled a 1 on that one. Anyway, it's our creatures episode, so thank you for joining us on that. For Dan Ream, I'm Tom Gross, and until next time, keep rolling those 20s. See you later.